everybody. This is Alicia Halliday. I'm the Chief Science Officer of the Autism Science Foundation. Thank you guys for all joining us for Sibs Stick Together, which is our second webinar in this series where we actually are trying to further research involving these amazing Sibs and then also provide support mechanisms and social support and other ways for Sibs to communicate and to support each other. So today we have a very special opportunity. We have a panel today of 5 amazing siblings who each have a sibling with either a brother or a sister with a developmental disorder or autism. So we're going to be listing a few questions, and I'll go over those questions in a second. So we have 6 questions today for our panel. And those 6 questions are, at what age did you realize your sibling was different? How has your relationship with your sibling changed over time? What's the best memory you have of the time you spent with your sibling? How has your family helped support not just you and your sibling individually, but your relationship with each other? And also what we kind of want to get to is, what would you tell yourself at 10 years old, and what would your 10-year-old self tell you now that people have the benefit of being a little bit older and being able to reflect what kind of are their reflections? And what is an experience that you share only with other siblings? So are there things that you may not talk about with people other than those who have your shared experiences? So I am going to just briefly introduce the panel. They are all on the so they are all on here are the pictures of them. The first in the top left-hand corner, that is that's Samantha Els, our moderator and our major partner. She was born in the United Kingdom and moved to Florida when she was 8. She graduated from honors from the Pine School and has been attending Stanford for the last 3 years. She's majoring in human biology with a concentration on global public health. She's a member of the women's rugby team, and she spent a semester abroad doing research in Australia, so she's very well traveled. She's fluent in Afrikaans and English, proficient in Spanish and American Sign Language, and of course she's one of the hosts of this webinar series. The next one, the one with the purple in the background, her name is Evie Back. Evie Back is a college student. She's a sister to a brother on the autism spectrum. She's a skateboarder and a soccer player. She grew up in Pennsylvania, and she's attending the University of Pittsburgh, where she's studying biology with the goal of becoming an infectious disease doctor. She's passionate about research, and she helped organize the Scoring Goals for Autism Day, which happened a few years in a row to support families across the spectrum to join together to play soccer. The male representation on our panel is Nathan. He will be a junior at Texas A&M University studying biomedical engineering. He was inspired by his brother Charles, who was diagnosed with Phelan-McDermid syndrome. Maybe Nathan will talk about Phelan-McDermid syndrome, but it's a specific genetic mutation that people with Phelan-McDermid syndrome have about a 60 to 80% chance of having an autism diagnosis. As a result of his brother's diagnosis, which includes developmental disability, epilepsy, limited mobility, and speech, he's spent the last summer working at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston examining the function of genes involved in neurodevelopment. And he actually did an amazing piece for Texas A&M University, and we have the link in the bios so you can read about it. It's really an amazing piece. The next person is the bottom left-hand corner. Lucy Hatchell. She is a disability law fellow on the education team. After she finished her fellowship, she volunteered working to resolve special education and discipline issues. She's a native of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. She got her degree in journalism before she went to UNC Law School. She, after college, went to work in California. Then she moved back to North Carolina. So another well-traveled sibling, and she's been, obviously, as a special education lawyer, she's been passionate about advocating for individuals with autism. And last but not least, we have Amanda Lopez. She's a speech and language pathologist working at the Learning Center at the Els Center for Excellence in Florida. She grew up in Key West. with her mother, her father, and her 2 younger brothers, the oldest of which, Georgie, was diagnosed with autism at 2 when Amanda was 6. She credits her brother Georgie greatly for unlocking her passion and purpose to help students find their voice. She received an undergraduate degree in communication sciences and a master's in speech and language pathology from Florida State. In her graduate studies, she completed a work on a grant specializing in building the capacity of SLPs to address the needs of people with autism and their families. And she's now completed her 4th year working in the field and looks forward to fulfilling a career working to enhance the lives of individuals with autism. So I am going to turn it over to our host and moderator, Samantha Els, who's going to, and I have the question, Samantha, right here. So to maybe address, can you see it? This way you have the questions right in front of you. You know, you can start out however you want, say a few words, and then we can get into the questions.
Yeah, of course. At the moment, I actually can't see what's on your slide. I don't know if anyone else can right now.
Okay, let me.
I do also have the questions in front of me, at least for my piece, but just in case, like if other people also want them pulled up, I know that the slide would be super helpful.
Okay.
I have a tendency to forget what I'm supposed to be talking about once I get going.
It's okay. Yeah, maybe I'll also prompt with if you need it. I didn't realize you couldn't also see the slides, but I can also send the slides out.
Yeah, it might also just be me, but like I said, like I have them in front of me, so I can also prompt everyone else when we get started.
Okay.
But yeah, so I guess I will get us started with it and start talking about at what age I realized that my little brother Ben was different. So obviously everyone's diagnosis comes at a different time. For Ben specifically, it was when both of us were really young. So there's only about a 3-year age difference between the 2 of us, which creates a really interesting dynamic because in like neurotypical sibling situations, that dynamic can also be super different. But for me, Ben is as much my kid as he is my brother, which has been a really just interesting situation growing up. But I think I didn't realize there was anything different about our relationship until I moved for the first time. And that didn't happen until I was around 8 or 9 years old. So the thing for me was that growing up, all of my really close friends had known me and my brother since we were kids. And so I guess the way that we played with one another was maybe a little different, but nobody really noticed because that's how we all grew up. And so my mom used to always joke with me when I was growing up and we had moved that the friends that I would bring over more than once just happened to be the ones that really got along with Ben as well. And it was really helpful because he's a much better judge of character than I am. And so that really helped me like build not only my relationships with people in my life, but also to build a group of really supportive people that I had around me. And so it worked out really well for me because he did like half the work for me because he would just choose and be like, that's not the one. And he always ends up being right, oddly enough. And so my relationship with Ben over time, which is our second question, has gotten a lot closer. I think that's partly due to how much more verbal and social he's become, because I think that I was definitely the more loud and outgoing one, almost in a way to compensate for how quiet he was around strangers and things. I would feel that I would be talking for both of us all the time, and I still kind of do. But when he started to grow up and have his own voice and start to have his own opinions and start talking for himself, our relationship became a lot stronger because obviously I've spent so much time with him that our sense of humor is really similar and he's hilarious. And so he'll come with me and he'll still hang out with all of my friends and I can take him places nowadays, which is something that I wasn't always able to do. And I feel really lucky that I can do that now because the same way that I learned to deal with like my social anxieties and the things that held me back from interacting with people, he's also learned to do that in his own way. And so now I take him out to restaurants, he drives around with me, we just hang out the way that I guess a lot of other siblings get to as well. And so plus me being more responsible means that I've grown up enough to be able to not only look after myself, but also for him. And so now that I can finally sort of cook, it means that he can come and hang out with me, and I can make dinner for him, and I can just tend to him in the ways that I need to when he comes over. And the way that you would for any younger sibling, really, which took a while because I had growing up to do, but nowadays it's incredible having him around. In terms of family support, my parents were really good at understanding that my brother and I's relationship was something really personal to us. And so it didn't really, I don't think that they had to do anything that was really out of their way. I think that the way that they raised us was just in that understanding that to see from another person's perspective is really important. And so for me to understand what was going on with Ben on a given day, like Ben's gonna have a good day and a bad day as well. And for us to have an argument, or for me to be frustrated, or for him to be annoyed with me and just like to get tired of one another, is an entirely human interaction. That is how every sibling on the planet functions. You are not going to have this ideal, picturesque, really cute picture that I use for my bio type of day. Like there are some days when he's gonna run me up the wall because I have sung Frozen in 18 different languages and my voice hurts. And so there's days that go by like that that are these really fun memories. And there's also days when like he smacked me upside the head in the car, and that was really annoying because obviously I'm not going to retaliate because it's Ben, and there's just that little bit of a difference if he hits me versus if I hit back. But dang, did I want to. And so my parents were really good at not shaming me for those days, and just understanding that that's a part of every sibling relationship, and the autism is not something that's going to change that. It's just something that's going to highlight different sections of it. And I'm in a lucky position where I'm the older one anyways, and so it's kind of my job to be the bigger person regardless. And so that just gets a little more highlighted when we're in like really frustrating arguments where I'm just like, you need to wear pants when there's people in the kitchen. I don't know how else to explain it to you. I don't really know the reason for that, but it's a societal thing. In terms of what I would tell myself at 10 versus what my 10-year-old self would tell me now, whew, girl, 10-year-old me, really, she was bold. She was out there. I would stare straight back at the people that would stare at me and my brother and make them as uncomfortable as humanly possible. Since then, I've realized that there's so much more that I can do for people versus making their discomfort worse. And so that's one thing that I would tell 10-year-old me is that people actually, once you break down that barrier of discomfort, people can have just as much fun with Ben as my family and I do. And overcoming that first moment of, oh, this is a new situation and I'm not sure how to handle it. Like, for example, my brother finds it really amusing to swear at new people. Now, he doesn't mean this in a bad way at all. He just knows that it gets a reaction. And I mean, it's funny. And so he walks up and it's really hard for people not to laugh when the first thing he tells you is the first 3 swear words that comes to his mind. But the thing is that people really laugh and enjoy that. And in having that moment with Ben, they've realized that like, hey, I can still talk to this kid. We can still have a relationship. It's going to be a little bit different than what I'm used to, but once you get people over that discomfort, it leads to growth. And that's something that's really important because then the next time that they meet somebody with autism, they're going to have a much easier time connecting, and they're going to make not only themselves more comfortable, but their family members, their friends, and even the person on the spectrum themselves. And I think that moment has so much more impact than if we were like, oh, I'm so sorry that he did that, and like, I'm like, please don't take it personally, versus having that interaction. What would 10-year-old me tell today me? She had so much fun in general that I think she would just remind me that life's not that serious, and that the way that Ben sees life is sometimes the way that I should try and mimic. Because what I've always learned from my brother is that, like I said, he's a better judge of character than I am, but that's because he's not impressed by any of the random things that people try and pull today. Like, he doesn't even really understand ego. So if you're trying to like show off with goodness knows what accomplishments, it's just not going to work. But if you laugh from your gut and you have a big smile that crosses your face and you mean it when you talk to people, that's your Ben's best friend. And by proxy, you're my best friend. And so I think 10-year-old me would just remind me of that kind of reaction. And just going back to my point that not every day is going to be an easy day, I think that's something that I only really share in settings like this, where I know that the people I'm talking to are going to understand where I'm coming from. And that's to say that I have a lot of fear going into the future. There's a lot of things that I don't know how I'm going to control. When my friends do things like they plan like, oh, one day I want to live in New York in an apartment and I'm going to work on Wall Street or something ridiculous. I don't really have that same thought, because in my head, I'm like, okay, so where am I going to put the guest room so that Ben will have enough space to have his own room, but also know that I'm right around the corner and can still provide for him and hang out with him. And I've realized that that's not really a thought process that goes through a lot of other people's minds. And it's about it's not about managing my expectations. Ben's a part of my life, and he's going to be a part of my life forever. And that's going to affect whether or not I feel like I want to have kids of my own, you know? And that's not something that I'm always comfortable sharing with people, because, not to get political, but as a woman, there's a lot of expectations on what you should be doing and how you should be having a family, and a lot of just expectations that have built up with time. And I don't feel like any less of a sibling, any less of a child, any less of a human being for understanding that I have a kid. So I don't really need more. And that's not something I get to share. And there's a lot of guilt behind that. And I think that that's something that we shouldn't be hiding so much, and should actually give an opportunity for other people to open up to that as well. And whether or not everybody today is open to that like very intimate discussion is completely up to them, and I put no pressure on anyone. But for me personally, I think the guilt that comes with that is something that I don't share very often. In terms of happiest memory, so we can end on a high note and move to the next person, because I've been talking for too long, is genuinely any time that I have Ben's full attention and I can make him laugh as hard as he makes me laugh. If I'm having an awful day and I come home and the first thing Ben does is tell me my favorite joke, or greet me as, we have like inside jokes, obviously, as all siblings do, but one of ours is there's a section in Finding Dory or Finding Nemo, one of the two, where Dory greets Marlin and says, "Hey there, Mr. Grumpy Gills." And if he greets me with that, I dang near cry every time, because that's how I get him out of like a tantrum. And so I know that he's having a good day and wants to make me feel better if he greets me that way. So yeah, I'd love to move it on to whoever feels comfortable going next. In my screen, Evie is the next person. So if you're feeling up to it, you can take it away. And if anyone has questions or comments, please send them wherever. I'm on an iPad, so if anyone sees anything that I've missed, please just let me know, because my screen is funky.
Why don't we go over by question, so each person will be able to answer each question as we go along. So Evie, you can take it away. About what age did you realize your sibling was different?
Okay, yeah, no problem. So I would say kind of like Samantha, that it was like somewhere in elementary school. So my brother Tommy is actually older than me. I'm the younger sibling. He's about 18 months older than me. So we're very close in age, like very close in age, like just like almost like kind of a year apart sometimes it feels. And so I would say when we were in elementary school, it wasn't like when I noticed that he was different, it was when I noticed that other kids were seeing that he was different. Because to me, it was just like, that was him. But then other kids were saying like, no, he's different than the rest of us. And so that's when kind of like I understood that. And then my parents started to explain it to me more, I think.
Lucy, do you want to go next? Same
Sure.
question. What age did you realize that there was anything different?
Well, I similarly, my brother and I are 20 months apart, so very close in age. I'm the older, but there are 4 of us, so that's also a little bit different. And My brother sort of had the classic gaining all of his skills and losing them all at 2.5. So he was speaking in full sentences and lost everything at 2.5, which I think, you know, obviously that's when I realized something was different. I'm also realizing I'm a lot older than everybody else on this panel. So when I was young and Vinny was diagnosed, people didn't know what autism was. I mean, they really didn't. People thought we were saying he was artistic and asked me if he could draw well. So that I think is just like sort of a different perspective. But yeah, since we're close in age, it was just when he lost all of his language.
Nathan, you're next in my screen.
Perfect, yeah. So I guess Charles is also a couple years older than me, and he hit his developmental milestones on time for the most part, like walking and talking, but he was slow to develop speech. So he was formally diagnosed when he was 5, and then later diagnosed with Phelan-McDermott syndrome when he was 7. So I was probably about 10, and he must have been about 12 or 13 around then when like I started to realize that other siblings were a lot different. So it was also elementary school, and I think I would see that like my friends' brothers would be wrestling or playing basketball, and Charles and I never did any of those things. But yeah, so I always knew Charles had his differences, but that was kind of the epiphany moment for me to see that, yeah, Charles is definitely different than these other siblings, and yeah.
And Amanda? Amanda, you're muted at the moment.
Sorry, the pressure washer people were running by my window, so I
completely understand.
But I was young. I had actually probably just started going to preschool. So my brother and I are I'm older, and there's about a 3-4 year age difference. I can't do the math right now, but I was like super infatuated with preschool. I wanted to come home and just like go in front of my little chalkboard and like teach him things, because I was learning the ABCs and he was, you know, could finally hold his head up and like, you know, he's like, you know, graduated potato because he was so little. But my mom kind of told me one day that, and I came to her and I said, Georgie's not listening to me. And she was like, okay, he's like 2. What do you mean he's not listening? Okay. But it was kind of like he stopped answering to his name. And like those kinds of things, I think, were those red flags for my parents, that like he was just like kind of started retreating into his own kind of world. But I think my memory of, because I think I thought being so young and thinking like, okay, well, he's just needs to learn these things. Like that's just it. Like he's just gonna learn how to talk and how to, you know, play with me, and like we're just gonna teach him. And it wasn't until I was in elementary school, and he was also in like that kindergarten age, and I was in 3rd grade and he was in kindergarten. And I remember he would elope a lot as a child, so he would run away. And I was in the hallway with my class, and he ran out of we were near his classroom, and he ran out of the classroom. And like my first instinct was, I want to run after him, but his teacher was like very closely behind. But I just remember all the kids looking at him and just thinking like, why did he do that? And I'm like, I don't know. And just feeling very like, at first like judged, like, because everybody knew that was my little brother. And then people were like, why did he do that? And then kind of like instinctively, like you, Sam, like I was like, who cares? Like, you know, mind your business. We're supposed to be in line, you know? So it's like, I think that was like a moment for me where I was like, okay, this is like, it would seem very strange to other people. What was so normal and was so like typical to me was not to everyone else. So that was like, I think that was like the moment I realized, you know, that things were more challenging, like, and were going to be for like the longevity of you know, his life. So
Yeah, I think that moment of foresight is something that all of us have really shared. And I think for me, like it's crazy to think of all the experiences that we have gone through together. Like Lucy, the artistic thing, my best friend growing up did not know until we hit like middle school that my brother was on the autism spectrum and not just like an art prodigy. There was just no crossover there. But yeah, and Amanda, I actually do remember having really similar experiences of my little brother. Like we used to have different playgrounds based on age groups, and so my brother would just either run over in my direction or I would just run over in his direction, and I didn't notice that none of the other siblings were doing that. It was just the two of us, and then we would play like in the middle and my friends would come over and things like that. But it was definitely one of those things of like, huh, something's up, but we're gonna brush past it. But on that note, do we want to start on the how everyone's relationships with their siblings have changed over time? Do we want to head back to Evie?
Yeah, no problem. Don't mind my dog barking in the background, but our relationship, I mean, it's difficult. I don't have that many memories anymore of like being like a really little kid. Like my mom will tell me stories of how like my brother had like a dump truck that he would sit in, and then I would push him around, and then eventually I would push him into like a wall so that I could sit in the dump truck to make him push me around, and just like little kid stuff like that. But I would say over time we've always been pretty close, and we played music together for a long time. I play the drums and Tommy is an accomplished like guitarist and pianist, and so we've always had a lot of like shared experiences together that have kept us pretty close. And you know, I think like over time we've just become like better friends, even like though we're also siblings. You know, it was like just nice to be able to become adults and to like be able to be like, now we're like both adults and we can kind of be friends now too.
And Lucy, if you want to build off of that.
Sure. So Vinny and I have always been super, super close. So as kids, we were really close, and I felt very protective over him. And I would, you know, like volunteer in his special ed classroom and all that. And our relationship is dramatically different now. I mean, we're still very close, but I basically manage his entire life. So I manage a staff of 14 people who are with him for his care 24/7. Since I am a disability rights attorney, I manage his Medicaid benefits. So it's, you know, I manage his behavior intervention plan and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit different than just being like, you know, playing in the sandbox together, which, I mean, we still definitely hang out. We've got our weekly movie nights and all that, but the transition from being, you know, him being my little baby brother to him being a grown man who, you know, requires assistance, but is a man now, he's not a kid. I think that has been a big change in our life, but has brought us closer for, you know, a lot of other reasons and a lot of other ways.
And
Yeah.
Nathan?
Yeah, so I don't have to manage Charles's legal stuff, thankfully, but Charles has a lot of needs, and I think over time I've gotten a lot more patient with him to learn and think about what he wants. So Charles isn't verbal anymore. He used to have a big vocabulary, but he doesn't speak anymore. So it's hard for people to know like what he wants. But I've been able to, you know, read his body language and know what kind of foods and activities he likes. And so Charles has a difficult time understanding things for that reason, and he doesn't converse with me like other kids would. And so it taught me a great deal of patience, and it's really helped me interact with him and other people with the same challenges. So I think that's really how our relationships changed over the years, you know.
I think that's also super valuable in that sometimes it's hard to explain why you can understand your sibling, especially if they're nonverbal, and to explain to other people like who, it's kind of funny because I play translator a lot. And
Right.
so if we're having like conversations and my brother comes in and he does this thing where his stimming involves his iPad always. And so he really wants you to participate in that with him. And this is something that changed as he got older because it's how he's learned to socialize. And so what he'll do is he'll bring his iPad, he'll have you listen to the same thing at least 3 times to make sure you really got it. And then he'll ask you to repeat it back. So then together you're going through his routines with him. But it's been really difficult to explain when I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, you have to say this, this, and this. No, your tone wasn't right this way. And so it's been really interesting to see like how other people also deal with that. It's just a fun experience. But yeah,
Yeah.
Amanda, I want to keep going too. Or yeah, please, Nathan.
No, go ahead, Amanda.
I think that's very similar, Nathan and Sam. That's very similar to what I feel like. This one was a hard question for me to think about because I was thinking about the change because I felt like our relationship hasn't changed much. I feel like I've always been as close with him as I could be, and like and as active in his, when I went away to college, things changed, and I wasn't a constant in the household anymore. I was like a visitor, and a very like welcome visitor, but it was still, he would mark, I've noticed my brother would mark the time of year based on like how long I was home. Like if it was like longer than a week, it was like Christmas. Like, so then he kind of like, but I think the patience aspect, because I think when I when I was in high school and when I got to college and I started, learning more about not just about autism, and just because I knew about autism obviously, but I knew my brother in the scope of what autism was. So when I finally, I started learning things, I was like, okay, like this makes sense. Like he does this because that's a characteristic that they, that researchers, have identified as, something with, autism spectrum. So it was all kind of making sense to me. And then it was kind of shifting into like, I started to feel like he should be doing certain things in a certain way. And like, I'm from Key West. We live on an island. There wasn't a lot of, there was no behavior analysts when he was growing up. It was like, my parents would have to have, the UN card was the closest card center, and they would, his behavior, the people who wrote his in-home behavior plan would come every like, couple months, so it was like, there wasn't a lot of consistency. So I just had all these ideas when I went away to school that, well, he's capable of this, he's capable of that. And then, I kind of hit a point in graduate school when I was, shadowing another family, and I realized like, it's not about like what he can and can't do. It's like how I needed to embrace him more. I needed to embrace the differences more than try to shift it to make things quote unquote easier for myself and my family. And I needed to change that mindset. Like, it's not about us, it's about him, and like really celebrating the difference. And this is probably also the fifth question: what's something that you would say like in this space rather than outside? I probably would never admit that, because I feel like that's a little bit of a not necessarily something I'm proud of, that I thought for a long time that like I needed to, we needed to change these things about him to make our lives easier. That's not something I would ever have thought I would have ever thought, and then I realized when I was younger, I needed to go back to that mindset when I was younger that, I didn't care what people thought. I didn't, I was like, we were just so happy when he started reading, like, and, comprehension totally out the window, but like he was like fluently, he would just read movie titles or like little things like that. Like, so that's where I was, that's, I think, where our relationship has changed, is that I'm 1,000 times more like, embrace and like accepting, embracing of the differences and the challenges, as opposed to seeing them as those, like what they are, like as challenges.
Thank you so much for sharing that, though, because I think it's really important for everybody that's not on this panel right now to understand that those harder feelings are part of this whole experience as well. And I think that we share it a lot more with other people than we would have thought, because I went through the same thing. I mean, I know that my parents went through the same thing as well. It's especially when we've come so far in terms of like the realm of autism and what's available to us. And I think that we're so lucky to be able to benefit from that. But all of us started off on this journey at a point where not all of this was available. Like the Els Center didn't exist. We moved countries because there just wasn't the resources that we needed for Ben. And the same way that that was so beneficial for Ben, I know that it really impacted me in a not great way for a while. And carrying that weight, I guess, for a long time was difficult, because it was hard to understand, especially at a young age, that like this is a decision that we need to make so that my brother can have similar opportunities to me, even if those opportunities don't present themselves to me right away. You know, like seeing the instant gratification for Ben was really hard moving, because I had to work to gain everything back that I already had. But that's not something that I was mature enough to admit. And I'm really glad that like this is a space where we can work through things like that, because I've definitely never had a group of people this large that I've been able to share experiences like that with. So thank you, really thank you for being vulnerable in that, because I know exactly how difficult it is, and I know that every person on this panel does too. And with that, and with me getting all emotional, what's the best memory, what's the happiest memory that you guys have with your siblings?
I can start. So there are a lot of like good memories with Tom. I have two that in particular stand out right now. Just like I guess they're like characterized by like his reactions to stuff. So like the first one was last year we were on our family vacation to the beach, and we were just having like a normal dinner conversation, and I had brought up the topic of charcuterie and charcuterie boards, and we were talking, and Tom was kind of like quiet for a second, and then he like asked us like very seriously, he's like, is charcuterie made with real shark? And we were like, oh no, like it's just like meats and cured cheeses. But it was just kind of like some of those stuff that like it just was just so funny in the moment that like, and then he didn't really get it until later, but we explained it to him, and then he was like, okay, and then he got it. And then the second one actually happened only a couple days ago, and like maybe I shouldn't share this, but it's fine. But I was sitting in our living room downstairs, and Tom, sometimes he'll just kind of like walk around the house in like laps when he's trying to like think and stuff. And so he had walked over to the front, and we have like a window, and he looked outside, and he was like, Evie, come to the window. And I was like, what is it? Like, what's going on? And he's like, come to the window. And so like I get up, I walk over, and then he's like, so for context, we have our next door neighbors is a like 2-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy, and he was like, Carson is pooping in Barbara's driveway. And like the 2-year-old hasn't really been potty trained yet, and so he was like outside and he pooped in her driveway, and Tom was like mortified and like flabbergasted by it, and like he was like, he's pooping in her driveway, I expect this from a dog. And he got so worked up, he called my mom at work to tell her about it, that like Carson had pooped in my neighbor's driveway. And it was just like, oh my god, like just so funny. Just like his reaction to it was like mortification, but he also like he thought it was funny, but it kind of took him a minute to get over the initial of like someone is pooping outside at someone else's driveway. And it was just like, oh my god, I told my friends that story like almost immediately, because it was so funny.
I can absolutely just see like that moment when they just sometimes just get stuck on it, and it's like it won't go away for the rest of the day. They're just like, someone pooped in the driveway, that happened.
Just the initialness of it, where he like wouldn't tell me what was going on until I went over. He was like so serious, like, come to the window right now. And then it was like, listen, man, sometimes kids poop outside.
It was an experience that had to be shared. Please.
Yeah.
Lucy, do you have one?
Really funny. Yeah. So I've got a million, but my brother doesn't have a lot of language at all. And we attempted to take him to my other brother's wedding a few years ago, and we didn't really plan very well, and that was a lot of change. We tried to fly him across the country. It was a lot of change, and we didn't do the greatest job. So he pulled down his pants, ran down the aisle, and kissed my sister-in-law. So it was a small wedding, and everybody was fine with it. But so then when I was going to get married, we decided we were going to really plan ahead. So we worked with him for a year and a half on saying the Lord's Prayer. And he got up in front, and we had a really big wedding, and he got up in front of everybody, and he was able to do it in the microphone, and he was able to say the grace at the dinner. So that was super special for us to have him be a part of that. But we learned from our mistakes is the moral of the story. He didn't take his pants off.
I don't think I've ever had a better contrast. And I think the best part is that these are opposite situations and they're both two of your favorite memories, you know? It's two sides of one coin, but
Exactly, it was hilarious. Didn't want to have my own one.
Exactly. We'll take that once and we'll move forward. Nathan, you're up.
Yeah, so I think honestly probably one of my best memories is when we went to Disney World back in like 2012. So I was 12 then, Charles was probably 14, and like we would constantly watch these DVDs. Like we had our big case of all this DVDs, like Disney movies we love to watch. We'd watch Mary Poppins like hundreds of times, and like we'd watch, Nemo and all these movies just dozens or hundreds of times. And so we finally got to go to Disney World and see the characters and ride the rides, and Charles just loved it. I think he was so happy then. And yeah, that was good memory. That was probably one of the best.
I think I also know every line to like a good third of every Disney movie ever made. I can quote Finding Nemo like a record player. It's a little scary. So
I'm too familiar with the house, yeah.
Absolutely, I'm right there with you though. We just also don't know what Ben's reaction will be if he actually sees them in person, because on a screen is one thing and he doesn't do great with the whole mascot situation. So have yet to test that one out. Amanda, if you go.
I want to jump in just because,
Yeah,
Vinny
please.
took to Disney World and he tried to take off everybody's costume. So for the same reason.
Nice. But were pants on him that time, or?
I believe so.
See, my brother's other problem is that if we would go to anything, like if it rains, if there's a drop of water on this man's shirt, you better believe it's coming off. He's, for someone who's not a very he's not the cleanliest of beings, none of us are. He is an Els at the end of the day. But for somebody that is not the cleanest eater, he's very picky about clean clothing. So that's another future one that we're gonna have to work around. I'll have a big backpack with a lot of changes of clothes ready. But Amanda.
I think I've had a lot too. So, but one of mine also kind of centers. My cousin got married a few years back, and we didn't do a great job of like the prep, what to expect. We didn't really. I think my parents were kind of under the, they were like, if he gets dressed for the wedding, that's going to be like, that's it. If he gets dressed and takes photos, that's like, that was going to be the goal. And he actually came, we all, the really close family came, the immediate family were there the night before the rehearsal, and we went out to a restaurant, and after a whole day of driving from Key West to Tampa, he actually sat in the restaurant with my family and stayed the entire meal, which was like, that was like a feat in itself. And like, it was just, and he kind of stayed, and he had my mom's phone. He was like listening to like his YouTube videos and like the Disney stuff, but he stayed the whole time. And I don't think I had seen him stay in a restaurant for longer than like 30 minutes since he was like young enough to be like in a chair, like strapped in a chair. So it was kind of like, and those are like the moments that I kind of reference where like he's like surprises me, and like just how poorly we can prep him for something, because he didn't even know he was going. It was like one of those things, they were in the car, they were going to the hotel, and they're like, okay, we're just gonna go to the restaurant, meet everybody, because that's what, let's try it. And I was like, I'm in my mind like, the professional, like that's not how you do things, but it's like, that's just, he just made a liar out of me, and which is fine, and that was perfect, and it was such a wonderful night. And like, he ended up, he got dressed for the wedding. He did not come to the wedding. My dad ended up staying in the hotel room with him, which was, and then it was all fine, you know, but that was kind of like, that weekend was like a really good one from, like, I hold a lot of good memories from that, because even though it didn't go exactly like how I really wanted it to, because I wanted him to be there for the, you know, the ceremony itself. I wanted him to go to the reception and sit, you know, but, you know, he did it on his own terms, and he, you know, he was so successful in so many ways that, like, those are the moments that those are the ones I remember the most.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's funny because that's another thing that, like, until I talk to other siblings, I don't realize is something that we all sort of just do. And that we have these little, we call them our rhymes, but my brother will tell you exactly on his terms, like, okay, we're going to go, let's say, like, okay, first dinner time, and then we're going to go fly, or then we're going to go on the golf cart. And if you don't repeat it to him in those terms, he knows something's up, and you're not going to do it the way that he wants you to. So he'll tell you again, he's like, no, it's dinner, and then we go on the golf cart. And he'll look you straight in the eye until you repeat it just that way. And then you have, like, life happens, and sometimes you have to just get dinner on the road on the way home. And it's just as special, like, those moments, like, they make the mundane so exciting when, like, you can have dinner with everyone together. And I know that the first time that my brother sat through a full dinner with us, I was like, jaw dropped to the floor type of thing. So it's definitely something that we all go. But, like, do you guys also have to tell rhymes, or, like, how do you prep your siblings? Sorry, this is just a personal question.
He does, my brother does very similar way. Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second, Amanda, and then Lucy, if we could.
Oh, so Georgie does something very similar to probably what Ben does, and he kind of comes up with a little, you know, script of what he wants you to say, and then he'll have, like, my mom repeat it back to him. It's usually my mom. He usually doesn't get me to do it, because I think he's realized, like, my mom runs the household, so he's like, everyone else is, you know, not my dad, not my other brother. It's like my mom. So he'll, like, ask her directly about, like, certain dates, and like, random dates. And lately it's gotten, he'll say, like, different years. So he'll say, like, 1964, Georgie was not here, and my mom will say, no, Georgie wasn't born yet. 1964. Like, he's gotten, like, I think he's kind of learned, like, about dates, and, like, you know, like, 1991, Amanda was born, and then my mom will treat 1991, Amanda was born, and then June 1st, 2021, Georgie, mommy, and daddy go visit Amanda in Jupiter. You know, like, he plans very far in advance, and it's like he's got his calendar in his brain, and it's unreal. But yeah, that repetition is
key. And Lucy?
Well, I was just gonna say we're really strict about sticking to a schedule, and we have a daily schedule and we have a weekly schedule, and he's allowed to rip the schedule at the end of the time. And so that's kind of like, and we've come a really long way with ABA since he's been older, to where he can now tell us what he wants in terms of, like, writing us letters. And that has been, I mean, sometimes I'll get, like, a letter in the mail that's like, you're 3 years old today, I want to watch a movie. But it's come a long way with that, with being able to, so we can now, like, honor his requests a little bit more. But yeah.
I love that. The input is also huge, like, moving forward, because I know that at least in our family, it's really easy to structure their day for them. Especially for Ben, like, my mom will do, it's a lot faster if she's like, okay, today you're gonna wear the blue pants and the nice stripy shirt that actually matches. But it's the same thing that she used to have to do with me as a kid, where instead of choosing my outfits for me, like, at a certain point, you're gonna have to sacrifice the time and, like, let them choose for themselves. And so now, like, yeah, he might show up in a pink shirt and salmon shorts or something and look like a lollipop, but he chose it, and that's the important part. And, you know, he actually has really good fashion sense, is what I've come to learn. But he also chooses the shirts that I really like when I come over, so it might be biased. But sorry, out of time for anyone that was planning on this ending at 3 p.m. So I'll try and run us into our next question. Just a little bit about how your parents have influenced your relationship and just how that dynamic has built over time? If we want to start with Evie again and go down the line.
Yeah,
If that
I can
helps.
start. So I think my mom, from like even when we were like really, really little, like her like main thing was that like we always had to be nice to each other. Like even if we were mad at each other, we still had to be nice to each other, to the point where she tells the story of when we were younger, she found like a very effective tool was there were 2 jars full of money, and one was like Evie's money and then one was Tommy's money. And if someone like did something mean, like say like, you know, like said a mean word, then like we would have to pay each other. Like I would have to give Tommy $1 if I like said something mean to him. And then at the end of it, like we would go to the dollar store and buy something. And by the end of the experiment, Tommy had all the money and I had no money. So, but working on it. And like, but that's just like, the main thing was like always trying to be nice to each other and like be patient with each other. And my parents still emphasize that because me and Tommy still get in spats sometimes over who's gonna like unload the dishwasher, who's gonna do the dishes, you know. But it's like, you know, just always emphasizing like being nice to each other is kind of like something that's I think really helped our relationship, you know. And like as we've gotten older and like more mature, it's kind of like, you know, kind of like, okay, we really have to be nice to each other because we're both adults now. We can't get mad over silly things.
I mean, I get mad at my housemates over the whole dishes thing, so it's human. Question though, do you still have the jars?
No, we do not have the jars anymore. Why? So I like didn't even remember that it happened, but my mom tells the story. She thinks it's pretty funny that Tommy got to buy stuff at the dollar store and I was just along for the ride.
You know, it happens. It's motivation. Lucy, if you want to go to.
Sure. My family has just always been super supportive and taught us not to be embarrassed and to be proud of our brother and to support him because he needs it more than the rest of us. And I mean, I was lucky enough to have 2 other siblings, so we all supported each other a lot, but they also were good about, like, Vinny didn't sleep as a kid at all, so we all had padlock doors so that he couldn't come in and wake us up because he used to come in and jump on the bed. So I think it's like my parents did a great job of like finding the balance. Like those are just examples, but the balance of it's hard sometimes to have a brother with autism, with severe autism. It's really, really hard. There are hard times, but also that he's still your brother and like you love each other and this is, you make it work. So I think they did a really good job of that.
Yeah, I always shared, and all the way through high school until I finally went to college, my brother and I have shared a wall or a hallway, like my whole life pretty much. And so I remember growing up, we also used to share a bathroom, but he went to bed before me and he was also a really light sleeper. So that meant like, you got to schedule those bathrooms. Like I had no chance of like, if I wanted to go to the bathroom at 3 in the morning, that was downstairs. That was not our shared bathroom because I would rather walk the stairs than have to put Ben back to bed. But yeah, so I think we've all been through the sleeping routine too, but thank God he sleeps now. Nathan?
Yeah, so my parents have always really encouraged us to do stuff together, and I think because Charles is nonverbal, I mean, he only really says a few words. I mean, he can understand us sometimes with keywords, but I think without that, you know, that barrier, communication barrier, it's hard to get that gratification of, you know, this is what he likes to do, or this is what entertains him. And so, I mean, with me being gone in college, I don't see him as often now, but now that I've been home for the last few months, I can, you know, we go to the pool together and he loves to swim. And it's like, I think that reward of just seeing him happier and, you know, oftentimes we'll go out in the Jeep together and we'll take the top down and drive around. And he loves to do that. And yeah, I think that reward of like, you know, him just being happy is like what makes it so worth it. And so he can't really tell us, you know, like this is what I enjoy to do or this is what I don't like. And so it's a little challenging to figure out. I think there was a period of time where, you know, well, when we were young, we used to do stuff together all the time. But there was a period where like I never really wanted to do anything with Charles growing up, and you know, we didn't like to do the same activities, and I think that was hard for me and my parents, and for Charles too. But for I guess the rest of our lives, my parents have always been very supportive of us individually and of our own relationship together. So that's been good.
Yeah, I used to also have the same type of car. Like I used to have a Land Rover that we could put the top down on. That was Ben's favorite thing. That and music with like a big bass so he can feel it like vibrate through the back. Happy days. But I think we'll try and run through Amanda as well just before we have to finish to respect the time of the people that planned only for an hour. So Amanda, if you want to finish up for us.
I think my family, similarly to Lucy, like they never really, they taught me to be more patient with my brother, and also him, you know, he has to have patience with us, like when during those like repetition things, like, you know, my mom will make him wait a little bit, you know, so she can kind of, you know, manage the situation and like say, okay, like, you know, sometimes we have to wait, and, you know, so she taught him some of that patience with us as well, and in his own way. But also like just my parents were very honest with me, my mom in particular, with like, you know, things that went on at school with Georgie, and like I think that really helped me to kind of form like my ideas of being his advocate, you know, like she was very honest with me from the very young age that like, you know, there's going to be one day that like it's going to be your job to be Georgie's advocate, like you're going to speak for him, you know, in so many ways. And so she just kind of, you know, both my parents were kind of like, they didn't take the circumstance of, you know, we lived on an island like that lightly. So like things with school, like there was like, you know, if there were ever issues at school, it wasn't like, oh, well, we don't have the resources. My parents were like, well, you find them, like you figure it out. Like that's, you know, he's a person, he's a child, he's a student of yours, he's entitled to X, Y, Z. And that's, you know, so I think that that's definitely shaped who I want to be for as a professional and as a, you know, a sibling to my brother who's, you know, going to take care of him one day. So I think that was their biggest way of kind of bringing us all together, you know, and having us, you know, building our relationship as like, you know, kind of half brother and sister.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think all of us here like share that need for the equity, and I think that's something that's also tough to explain to other people that might not have the same sibling relationships, and understanding that it's never been a problem for me to understand that if we're going to a hotel, I will not get a room, Ben will get a room. Yes, I am older, yes, I am taller, but Ben will get a bed and I will sleep on the couch. And that's something that part of life, you know, and that doesn't feel like I'm giving something up. That just feels like, why in the heck would I make my little brother sleep on a couch, you know? And I think that's definitely, all of us here are perfect examples of what happens in these situations afterward. Like, I think all of our careers have been driven to a certain extent by how we've grown up and what our parents have shown us. I mean, all of us seem to be in us either working like with actual people on the spectrum, or advocating for them, or researching the biology behind it and all of that. Like, that's why I'm focusing in global public health. My whole life is about human biology and creating equity in healthcare. And I think it's amazing to see what each of our parents has done and the impact that they've had in that. But also just understanding that that all works as a unit has been, I mean, huge for everyone here. And I hope that's one of the takeaways that anyone that didn't get to speak today takes from this. But yeah, I know that we do have to wrap up. If Alicia wanted to hop back in. I'm not very good at making people stop talking because I like talking.
No, I was just going to thank you guys. We did run out of time, but I was thinking we got some great questions from people who were listening. So I was thinking we could do this again.